The church bells rang louder than the beating of a guilty heart, and as the sun rose on that Christmas morning, no one in the busy city of Kintaba knew that before the day would end, a proud billionaire would kneel in shame, a homeless woman would rise in honor, and even a pastor would struggle to explain what his eyes had seen. Some moments look small when they begin, but they carry the power to break lives open, and this was one of them. The streets around Holy Grace Church were alive with color and sound. Women wore bright dresses, children laughed as they chased one another, and men greeted each other with smiles and warm handshakes. Christmas was a day of joy in Kintaba, a day when even the poorest hoped for kindness. Cars lined the road, some old and dusty, others shining like mirrors under the sun. Among them, one black luxury car stood out, guarded by men in neat suits. People whispered as it stopped, because everyone knew who had arrived. Kofi Adewale stepped out slowly, adjusting his expensive coat. He was tall, confident, and carried himself like a king who believed the world belonged to him. Kofi was one of the richest men in the city, a billionaire whose name was spoken on radio and written in newspapers. Wherever he went, people stood straighter. Wherever he spoke, others listened. That morning, he had come to church not just to pray, but to be seen. Inside the church, Pastor Samuel Okoro smiled as he watched Kofi enter. He welcomed him warmly, thanking him for coming and reminding the congregation of his generous donations. The people clapped, some with real joy, others with quiet envy. Kofi nodded proudly, soaking in the attention. To him, respect was something money could buy. But outside the church gate, sitting on the cold ground near a mango tree, was a woman most people tried not to see. Her name was Amina Njeri. She wrapped her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders as the morning breeze passed. Her dress was faded, her sandals worn, and her hair was tied back simply. Life had not been kind to her, yet there was something calm in her eyes. She watched people enter the church, families together, children holding gifts, couples walking side by side. Hunger pulled at her stomach, but she stayed where she was, quiet and still. Then her eyes met Kofi's. At first, neither of them moved. The noise of the street faded as years rushed back into that single moment. Amina lowered her gaze, hoping he would walk past and forget her. But Kofi stopped. A slow smile spread across his face, sharp and cruel. Well, he said loudly, his voice carrying to those nearby. If this is not Amina Njeri. Look at you. Is this where life brought you? People turned. Some recognized Kofi. Few recognized Amina. She stood slowly, her hands trembling, not from fear but from memory. I did not know Christmas could bring such surprises, Kofi continued, laughing softly. You see, Pastor, this is the woman who once thought she could leave me and survive. The words cut deep. A small crowd gathered, curiosity pulling them closer. Amina felt her chest tighten, but she did not speak. Kofi walked closer, his shoes clean against the dusty ground. I offered you comfort once, he said, lowering his voice only a little. Now look at you. Homeless. Begging near a church. Is this the future you chose? Amina raised her head. Her eyes were wet, but steady. I am not begging, she said quietly. I only came to pray. That made him laugh louder. Pray, he mocked. Prayer does not buy food, Amina. Prayer does not build houses. Money does. Some people looked away in shame. Others watched in silence. No one stopped him. Amina said nothing more. She picked up her small cloth bag and walked past him, through the church doors. Her steps were slow, but her back was straight. She went to the last bench and sat down, her hands folded, her lips moving in a soft prayer no one could hear. Pastor Samuel had seen everything. His heart felt heavy. He noticed the way Amina sat, quiet and broken, yet strong. He also noticed the pride in Kofi's eyes as he took his seat near the front, greeted like a hero. As the service began, songs filled the church. People sang about love, forgiveness, and hope. Kofi sang loudly, his voice strong. Amina sang softly, tears falling onto her hands. During the prayer, Pastor Samuel looked toward the back again. Something about the woman stirred his spirit. He did not know her story, but he felt it carried weight. Outside, the city continued to celebrate, unaware that two lives tied by a painful past were sitting under the same roof once again. And as Christmas light poured through the church windows, no one knew that this was only the beginning. Before the final song would be sung, before the day would end, the truth hidden for years would start to rise. Pride would be tested. Faith would be proven. And what was meant to shame would soon turn into something no one expected. So stay with this story till the end, dear listener, because some lessons arrive slowly, and some miracles wear torn clothes. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories of life, truth, and the African soul, remember to subscribe, listen closely, and keep your heart open, because the next moment may change everything. Long before the cold Christmas morning in Kintaba, before the sharp words and the watching crowd, there was a time when Kofi Adewale owned nothing more than a small bag of clothes and a head full of dreams. The city had not always known his name, and pride had not always lived in his heart. Kofi was born in a quiet village called Luzenga, where red earth stained bare feet and evenings were filled with drum sounds and stories by the fire. His mother sold roasted maize by the roadside, and his father had died when Kofi was still young. Life was hard, but the village taught him strength. From childhood, Kofi believed he was meant for something bigger than Luzenga. He wanted the city, the tall buildings, the shiny cars, and the respect that came with success. It was in Luzenga that he met Amina Njeri. Amina was known in the village for her gentle nature. She helped her mother fetch water, sang in the church choir, and cared for children who were not her own. She had a warm smile that made people feel safe. When Kofi first saw her, she was carrying a basket of groundnuts on her head, laughing with friends. That laugh stayed with him long after the day ended. Their love grew slowly, like a strong tree fed by patience. They walked together in the evenings, shared dreams under the moon, and promised each other a future beyond the village. Amina believed in Kofi even when his idea sounded impossible. When he said he would go to the city and return successful, she did not laugh. She packed food for his journey and prayed for him at dawn. Kofi left Luzenga with little money and big hope. The city welcomed him with hunger and rejection. He slept in crowded rooms, worked long hours, and failed many times. Often, it was Amina who gave him strength. She sent him what little she could from the village. Once, when he lost his job, she sold her only gold earring to help him start a small trading business. Slowly, things changed. Kofi's business began to grow. He learned how to speak, how to dress, how to deal with powerful people. Money came, first in small amounts, then in rivers. With each success, he felt himself rising higher, but something else was happening too. The higher he climbed, the more he looked down on where he came from. When Amina came to visit him in the city for the first time, she was proud of him. She wore her best dress and carried food from home. But Kofi felt embarrassed. The city had taught him new rules, and Amina did not fit them. He began to correct her speech, her clothes, even her silence. The arguments started quietly and grew louder. Kofi wanted parties and business dinners. Amina wanted peace and family. He wanted speed. She believed in patience. One night, after a harsh fight, Kofi told her that love was holding him back. He said he needed someone who matched his new life. Those words broke something inside Amina. She returned to Luzenga alone. Not long after, trouble followed her. Her mother fell sick, and the little savings they had disappeared into hospital bills. A trusted cousin betrayed her, taking land that was meant to be hers. When she tried to reach Kofi, his phone went unanswered. His silence spoke louder than any insult. Amina came to the city again, this time not as a visitor but as someone searching for survival. Jobs were hard to find. Nights were colder than she remembered. One illness left her weak and unable to work for weeks. Slowly, the ground beneath her life fell away. Yet even in pain, Amina refused to hate. She prayed. She helped others when she could. She remembered the teachings of her elders, that bitterness poisons the soul. There was one choice she made during those dark days, a quiet decision known to no one, that would change many lives. She helped someone in need when she herself had nothing, not knowing the weight of that act. As the past faded back into the present, Christmas bells rang again in Kintaba. Amina sat at the back of the church, carrying years of loss and quiet strength. Kofi sat at the front, wearing wealth like armor. Neither of them knew that the road they had walked apart was about to cross again in a way that would shake them both. The air inside Holy Grace Church felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The songs of Christmas filled the room, but not every heart sang with joy. Some people smiled and clapped, while others sat quietly, thinking of struggles waiting for them outside the church doors. Pastor Samuel Okoro stood at the altar, watching faces, listening not only to voices but to spirits. His eyes returned again and again to the back bench. Amina Njeri sat there with her head slightly bowed, her hands resting gently on her lap. She did not look around. She did not try to draw attention. Yet something about her presence felt strong, like a deep river moving silently beneath the ground. Pastor Samuel had learned over many years that God often hid greatness where people refused to look. Near the front, Kofi Adewale shifted in his seat. He felt proud, satisfied, and important. When the pastor invited him to speak, he rose without hesitation. The sound of applause wrapped around him like a warm blanket. Kofi stepped forward and cleared his throat. On this special day, he began, I thank God for success, for favor, and for the power to rise above nothing. He spoke about hard work and reward, about leaving poverty behind. His words sounded smooth, but beneath them lived a sharp edge. Some people nodded. Others felt uncomfortable but stayed silent. When he announced his donation, the crowd gasped. It was more money than most people in the church would see in many years. Kofi smiled again, enjoying the shock. Let this be a lesson, he added. Life rewards those who push forward. Pastor Samuel thanked him, but his voice carried no excitement. He felt a strange sadness. He glanced toward the back, where Amina had lowered her head further, her shoulders tight. After the service, people gathered in small groups, exchanging greetings and laughter. Children ran between the benches. Outside, the smell of food drifted through the open doors. Christmas joy returned to many hearts. Amina stood quietly and began to leave, but before she could step outside, a small boy dropped his shoe and began to cry. Without thinking, she knelt and helped him. She tied the lace gently, wiping his tears with her sleeve. His mother noticed and thanked her. Amina smiled softly and moved on. Pastor Samuel watched the moment. Something stirred deep inside him. He followed Amina outside and greeted her kindly. Sister, may I speak with you? He asked. She nodded. They sat under the mango tree near the church gate, the same place where Kofi had mocked her earlier. Pastor Samuel offered her water and listened as she spoke. Amina did not complain. She did not accuse. She only told her story simply, of loss, struggle, and faith. She spoke of believing that God still saw her, even when people did not. "What keeps you standing?" the pastor asked quietly. Amina smiled gently. "Hope," she said. "And the belief that what we give in secret matters." Those words stayed with him. As they spoke, an elderly woman passing by stopped and stared at Amina. Her eyes widened. "You," she whispered. "You are the one." Amina's face changed slightly. "Please," she said softly. "Do not say anything." The woman nodded, her hand shaking. "I will never forget what you did," she said before walking away. Pastor Samuel's heart beat faster. He felt he was standing near a hidden truth. Inside the church, Kofi laughed with business friends. He did not notice the quiet gathering of faith around him. He did not hear the soft sounds of truth waking up. As the sun moved higher in the sky, Pastor Samuel felt a heavy sense of purpose settle over him. The story of the day was not finished. Something buried was rising, and when it surfaced, it would shake more than one soul. That evening, as Christmas shadows grew long, the pastor sat alone in his office, praying for guidance. He felt certain now that the woman at the back of the church carried a story that could not stay hidden much longer. And somewhere between pride and humility, the path to truth was beginning to open. By the time the sun began to fall behind the tall buildings of Kintaba, the joy of Christmas had started to feel thin for some hearts. Laughter still filled the streets, and music played from shops and homes, but beneath the celebration, a quiet storm was gathering. For Kofi Adewale, the storm arrived without warning. He sat in the back seat of his luxury car, scrolling through messages on his phone, when his smile slowly faded. One message became 3. 3 became many. His business partner from the coast had pulled out of a major deal. Another message spoke of frozen accounts, delayed payments, and a sudden government review of his biggest project. Kofi's fingers tightened around the phone. This was not possible. Everything had been secure only days ago. "Turn back," he told the driver sharply. "Take me to the office." The car changed direction as Christmas lights blinked along the road. Inside Kofi's chest, something unfamiliar stirred. Fear. At his office, phones rang without rest. Assistants whispered nervously. Papers were spread across desks like fallen leaves. Kofi demanded answers, but none came fast enough. The business world he had trusted was pulling away, and money, the thing he believed would never fail him, was suddenly silent. Across the city, Amina Njeri walked slowly through a quiet neighborhood, guided by a church volunteer who had offered her a simple meal and a place to rest. She thanked the woman with a gentle smile. Though her body was tired, her spirit felt calm. Christmas had always been a day of reflection for her, a reminder that pain did not mean the end. As night approached, Pastor Samuel Okoro prepared for a small Christmas evening gathering at the church. It was not planned, but word had spread, and people came carrying candles, hope, and songs. The poor sat beside the comfortable. Children leaned against tired mothers. The church felt different now, softer, more honest. Amina sat among them, listening. When Pastor Samuel stood to speak, his eyes searched the room and found her again. He felt a strong pull in his heart. "Tonight," he said, "is not about money or titles. It is about truth, about love, and about what we carry inside us." As he spoke, Kofi arrived late, his face tight with worry. He took a seat near the aisle, no longer standing tall. People noticed the change, but no one spoke. The pastor invited anyone who wished to share a word or testimony. Silence filled the room. Then, slowly, Amina stood. Her voice was soft, but it carried. She spoke of walking through darkness and learning that kindness was a light no one could take away. She spoke of helping others even when she had nothing. She did not mention names. She did not speak of betrayal. Yet every word felt heavy with truth. Kofi felt his chest tighten. Her voice touched something buried deep inside him, something he had tried to forget. He remembered the girl from Luzenga who believed in him when he was nothing. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes fixed on the floor. As Amina sat down, the elderly woman from earlier stood briefly, her voice trembling. "I want to thank this woman," she said, pointing gently toward Amina. "Years ago, when my grandson was sick and I had no money, she helped me. She saved his life." Gasps filled the church. Amina lowered her head. Pastor Samuel's heart pounded. Pieces were falling into place. He remembered stories he had heard years ago, whispers of an unknown woman who had stepped in during a crisis, asking for nothing in return. Outside the church, Kofi stepped into the night air, struggling to breathe. His phone rang again. Another loss. Another blow. His knees weakened, and he leaned against the wall. The power he trusted was leaving him, and for the first time, he felt small. Inside, the candles burned quietly as Pastor Samuel prayed. He knew now that Christmas was about to reveal something far greater than gifts or songs. The storm had begun, and there would be no shelter from the truth. Night settled fully over Kintaba, and the city lights blinked like uncertain stars. Inside Holy Grace Church, the candles still burned, their small flames steady against the darkness. People sat closer now, as if drawn together by something they could not name. The air felt tight, filled with waiting. Pastor Samuel Okoro stood quietly near the altar, his Bible closed in his hands. His heart was heavy, not with fear, but with truth pressing to be spoken. He looked around the church, at the rich suits and worn sandals, at hopeful eyes and tired faces. Then he looked at Amina Njeri, seated again at the back, her hands folded, her head bowed. She looked peaceful, as if she had already accepted whatever would come. Near the aisle, Kofi Adewale sat alone. His phone lay silent now, face down on his lap. The man who had walked into the church that morning like a king now looked like someone carrying a great weight. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were red. He had learned in one day that money could disappear faster than it came. Pastor Samuel cleared his throat. "My brothers and sisters," he said slowly, "Christmas is a day when truth finds its voice. Tonight, there is a story among us that must be told." A soft murmur moved through the church. The elderly woman from earlier stood again, leaning on her stick. Her voice shook, but her eyes were clear. "I have waited many years," she said, "for this day." She pointed gently toward Amina. "This woman helped my family when no one else would. She paid for my grandson's surgery. She told the doctor to hide her name." Gasps rose like a sudden wind. Heads turned. Whispers spread. Pastor Samuel felt his chest tighten. "Is this true?" he asked Amina softly. Amina stood slowly. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "I did what I could," she said. "It was not for praise." Another man stood. "She helped my brother too," he said. "During the market 5 years ago. She gave money to rebuild stalls. We never knew who she was." More voices followed. Stories came from different corners of the city, all pointing to the same woman. Quiet help. Hidden kindness. No name attached. Pastor Samuel staggered back a step, his hand pressing against the altar. He remembered now. Years ago, during a terrible time, funds had arrived from an unknown source to support families and small traders. He had prayed to meet the person behind it. The name had never appeared. "Amina," he whispered, his voice breaking, "it was you." She nodded gently. The pastor's eyes filled with tears. He turned to the church, his voice shaking with awe. "Greatness," he said, "has been sitting at the back of this church." A wave of emotion swept through the room. Some people cried openly. Others covered their mouths in shock. Kofi stood slowly, his legs unsteady. The words felt like stones hitting his chest. He looked at Amina, really looked at her, and saw not a broken woman, but a strength he had never understood. He stepped forward, his expensive shoes sounding loud in the silence. "It was you," he said hoarsely. "All those years, when my first deal almost failed, the support, the bridge loan," his voice broke. "I thought it came from a friend." Amina met his eyes. "I wanted you to succeed," she said simply. That was all. Kofi's face crumpled. Pride drained away like water from a broken pot. He fell to his knees in front of her, the sound echoing through the church. "I mocked you," he cried. "I crushed your dignity. I forgot who I was because of money. Forgive me." Silence held the room. Everyone waited for her answer. Amina stepped forward and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "I forgave you long ago," she said. "Holding hate would have destroyed me." Pastor Samuel sank onto a chair, shaking his head in disbelief. "Lord," he whispered, "how did I not see this sooner?" Kofi wept openly now. The man who once laughed at the poor cried like a child. The church did not clap. No one cheered. They simply watched as a heart broke open. The pastor stood again, his voice filled with wonder and fear. "This day," he said, "has shown me that God walks in torn clothes and speaks in soft voices. I am shocked, not by what I have heard, but by what I almost missed." Kofi rose slowly. "I do not deserve mercy," he said to the church. "But I will change. I will make right what I broke." Amina nodded once, then returned to her seat. The candles flickered as if the walls themselves breathed. Christmas night had turned into a moment of judgment and grace. The truth had risen, and nothing would remain the same. Morning light crept gently over Kintaba, washing the city in soft gold. Christmas night had passed, but its power still hung in the air. People woke with stories on their lips, stories of what they had seen and felt inside Holy Grace Church. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a lesson. But everyone agreed that something real had happened. Kofi Adewale did not return to his mansion that night. He sat alone in a small guest room behind the church, unable to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Amina's calm face and felt the weight of his own words crushing him. For the first time in many years, he prayed without pride. He asked not for wealth, but for a clean heart. At dawn, he made a decision. Later that morning, the church filled again, not for celebration, but for truth. Pastor Samuel Okoro stood before the people, his voice steady but humble. "Yesterday," he said, "we witnessed the power of humility. Today, we must witness change." Kofi stepped forward. He no longer wore an expensive coat. He wore a simple shirt, plain and clean. His voice trembled, but he spoke clearly. He admitted his wrongs without excuse. He spoke of mocking the poor, of forgetting love, of worshipping money. He announced that he would step away from control of his company and return wealth taken without care back to the community. Schools would be rebuilt. Small traders would be supported. Not as charity, but as justice. People listened in silence. Some doubted. Some believed. Amina watched quietly, her hands folded. When Kofi turned to her, his eyes were full of respect. "I will not ask you to stand beside me," he said. "Your life is your own. But thank you for saving mine when I did not deserve it." Amina stood then, her voice calm and clear. "Let change speak louder than words," she said. "That is enough." In the weeks that followed, Kofi kept his promise. His wealth shrank, but his peace grew. He learned to listen again. He visited Luzenga, the village he had once been ashamed of, and knelt at his mother's grave, asking forgiveness. He greeted old neighbors without titles, without pride. Amina's life changed too, but not in the way many expected. She accepted a small home offered by the church, but she did not seek luxury. She helped organize support for women and children who had fallen through the cracks of the city. She taught that dignity did not come from money, but from how one treated others. Pastor Samuel often spoke of that Christmas in his sermons. "I learned," he would say, "that faith is not found in loud prayers or large donations, but in quiet obedience." One evening, as the sun set and drums echoed from a nearby celebration, Amina sat under the same mango tree where she had once been mocked. Children played nearby. She smiled, not because life was perfect, but because her heart was free. Kofi passed by and stopped. They spoke briefly, kindly, as two people who had walked through fire and survived. There was no bitterness left, only understanding. The city of Kintaba remembered that Christmas for many years. Parents told their children the story. Elders nodded when it was mentioned. It became a reminder whispered in homes and markets, that pride builds walls, but humility opens doors. And so, dear listener, let this story stay with you. Wealth can vanish. Beauty can fade. Titles can fall. But kindness given in secret grows louder with time. Never mock the poor, for tomorrow's truth may rise from the place you least expect. If this story touched your heart, stay with us. Subscribe to this channel, share the story, and listen till the end, because many more African tales of wisdom, love, and truth are waiting to be told.